The one on a clapboard, like a...
Hello and welcome to Ohio Northern University's SURF Environmental Humanities Lab podcast. We are an interdisciplinary group of undergraduate researchers who have developed their own independent study involving the environment using humanities methods. We have been advised by Dr. Forrest Klingerman, Emily J., and Jonathan Spielman. My name is Aubrey Davis. I am a studio arts major, and my project has been using arts-based methods to create research and materially informed works of art that explore reciprocity and sensory experience in the natural world. Arts-based research methods are a practice of research that results in material that is more descriptive and conversational versus a more objective kind of research body. And in doing so, kind of getting something that's much more personal is really a central focus to this methodology. The works I created were done with no purchased art supplies. Everything that you'll be able to see on the video was made by me, by my hands, all the materials. The pigment used to make the paint was refined from plants via a lake pigment method. That is precipitating a pigment from a dye bath using an alkali and a metallic salt. And the clay that the pigment has been applied to was refined from various sites around my home. In the instance of this environmentally centered study, my research is a materially informed project, as I knew that whatever I wanted to work with needed to be sustainably sourced. And in this project, it manifested as material that can be taken from and easily returned to the earth. The ideas of what the actual works of art would depict changed drastically from my initial conception because I knew letting those materials speak up and dictate what could actually be communicated was most important. So in that way, the works I've made and sharing with you today are vestiges, results of informed by the research process I engaged in. So as such, integral to the formal aspects of the work are what was growing and plentiful around me. By using materials that I myself acquired and are local to me, relationally, I created a sensory experience for myself that snowballed into the finished works you can see here. The process of this experience is what creates that artist as researcher dynamic. I've experienced an art practice that creative and intensive exploration of a material. This way, the environment is explored through conscious and materially informed works, acting as a wholly individual and specific reflection of my environmental sensory reality. In experimenting and researching processes of reciprocity, the work created from this research is completely compostable. This grounds the work in a material relevance. The work is coming from local biotic communities and then can easily be returned to them. The impermeable nature of these pieces may seem a bit unconventional, but considering the issue of waste and excess and its environmental impact, being conscious of how that would affect the pieces and what that would look like physically, wanted to make me create a more conscious series of works here. This process of figuring out, coming to know more about local materials and how to utilize them, and formulating what I've learned, observed, and asked into these art objects is important for my project, as it both grounds the work in an environment that I have become deeply connected to and relate to myself, and often commentates on the extremely wasteful industry that the arts can sometimes be. So the process of art making can often be counter to certain sustainability practices, such as frequently making use of plastics, most notably the acrylic plastic in acrylic paint, the production of cheap and dubiously sourced art supplies, and the chemical and material measures taken to ensure permanence in works of art, which compound really into a pretty substantial negative environmental impact. So these practices that we do in the art world, much like the rest of our material relationships, don't hold any pause for contemplating what will become of the art once it stops delivering and drawing knowledge from us. The permanence we often afford artwork and all objects in our day-to-day is counterintuitive to systems that involve the aforementioned notions of reciprocity, such as the environment. As I've experienced through immersing myself in this process of collecting materials, organic bodies wheel and deal in this business of constant change. utterly counter to the desires of permanence we falsely equate to stability. Like most objects in modern times, including facets of the natural world, many interactions are not based on or specifically foster attention and getting to consider the object rather, and what will happen to it once it leaves your immediate person or its usefulness kind of ends for you. Through practical knowledge of biological communities and time spent using senses to embody them, we are grounded to the specificity present in the environment. The uniqueness of the function and form of the spaces we live in fosters specific personal unions. The recognition through sound, look, and feel is what supplies the individual with a sense of belonging to the natural world. The feeling of home, as it could be referred to, is the confluence of recognizing these unfolding systems as they are, of different realities and knowledge holders such as plants and animals, and the grounds we can then use to inform potential plights and consequences of environmental action and inaction. Ultimately, this work is the result of working with the land I was born on and grew up with. It's a manifestation of home to me that we can all experience briefly in a personal way through this artworks, only for it then to become home again.
That was a really interesting presentation, Aubrey. Thank you for sharing. We've been asking, every person who does this, but you seem to have a sort of especially unique and significant answer. So how is it that you're defining the environment for this project?
Mm-hmm. So to me, the environment, and especially embodied in this project, are simply spaces that we humans kind of make the distinction of as outdoors. It's kind of interesting as to say it's not somewhere where it's entirely untouched by people, because people intervene with the environment all the time, but positively so often at that, so negatively. But so it became a kind of interesting sort of way to experience the world that's simply outside of a completely controlled and insular space, like a room or a building. So yeah, that's kind of how I've had environment defined in my mind. So going out and experiencing and collecting things, I knew a whole lot of spaces could be considered the environment.
That's interesting. So, I know you said you had this idea of environment before you went out. So, what factors do you think most feel, at least for you, that influenced your perception and action towards the environment?
Certainly the knowledge I have of it. I've kind of been a casual interest in biology and plant and science life. It's kind of that understanding, even though it's not that great, but at least through it getting an appreciation. And I'd say that's a real important factor, even if you maybe don't necessarily know the name of something, be it like a plant or an animal, taking the time to go out and at least see it, and kind of experience being near it, the sights and the sounds of spaces. You can at least get a feeling of things, and that grounds you in a way.
So your project is very interesting in the sense that it's going back into the earth.
Mm-hmm.
That's very neat. So do you have any plans to, with further research, do a similar project again, maybe with different materials, or do you just have any other ideas of something related to the environment that you could do in a similar way to this project?
Yeah, absolutely, I would say. Certainly, there was a lot of different ways I could have, and that was almost a bit stifling at the beginning there, because there was actually so many different ways I could have gone about making works that were biodegradable, compostable, completely, no net damage done. For instance, I could have made my own paper. I could have used a slightly different binder for the paints, which would have, given me completely different properties of the paints to work with. I could have done textiles. I could have, grown flax and spun linen out of it. I could have gone very far with these things, and certainly exploring that further is entirely in the future. It also just goes to show how much you can do with seemingly very little.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's been super neat to hear about. So, as sort of a final question, both for your segment and for our podcast, to round everything off, I'm interested to hear what you see as being the takeaway you had, or the takeaway you want our audience to have for the whole experience.
Well, I'd say specifically for my project, what I'd like folks to take away is certainly the importance of understanding, the objects around you, the material reality of things, what it takes to get them to you, and also what is around you literally, because so much can be done from so little, and especially going out and being in places, you can experience things that you may never experience ever again. Looking at our projects as a whole and kind of compounding on them, I'd say it's be really interesting to see and look at them all of our different perspectives, all the different things we were interested in under the broad topic of environment. Really kind of creates an interesting political, ethical, spiritual globe of looking at this one broad topic. It's very interesting to see. Thank you all for listening and or watching to the Ohio Northern Surf Environmental Humanities Lab podcast. As we've really appreciated your interest and support, and
Go Bears!